the Native Americans helped them, and they all celebrated together at the end. If you really dig into the actual history of what happened, it's not so simple. It's not so beautiful. There were lots of hard moments. There were lots of injustices done to the indigenous people in the United States or America, North America, when the settlers first came over. So it gets a bit more messy when you actually dive into the real accounts and what was happening. Um, but I think this article is more just kind of a basic general idea of Thanksgiving. People in the United States, just like the people I know, we all pretty much celebrate Thanksgiving as more of just a day to be grateful and to be thankful and to spend time with family. And I do know people who get upset about Thanksgiving because they want to show respect to the Native Americans in the US. And I think it's wonderful to show respect to them. I think it's still okay to celebrate this holiday of just being thankful. When it first became a holiday in the US, it was about setting time aside to uh, to be grateful. It wasn't really even about the early settlers or the Native Americans. Anyways, just giving a caveat out there because I know that it's not a holiday that other countries celebrate, and so there's more to the story. You can research if you'd like. I think that this is a pretty basic article, but that the average American celebrates it to just take time to be grateful and to count uh you know to count your blessings is a phrase people will say, to be grateful for the good things in their lives. All right, it's called Thanksgiving, a very American festival. Thanksgiving is perhaps the most American of America's festivals. While many countries have days when everyone eats a lot, only the Americans have a day on which they celebrate having enough to eat. Perhaps this may seem rather superfluous. Oh, guys, some words are so hard for me to say. How do you say this word? It's I'm gonna have to look it up in the dictionary. Hang on. Hang on, I have to see how to pronounce it. Superfluous. It's like superfluous. Superfluous. Okay, sorry. Perhaps perhaps this may seem rather superfluous in a country whose inhabitants are today among the best fed in the world. But to Americans, Thanksgiving is a reminder that this was not always the case. The last weeks of the year are a festive time in most countries, but while Europeans just celebrate Christmas and the New Year, Americans begin their festive season about a month earlier. The Feast of Thanksgiving, celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November, is second only in importance to Christmas in the American calendar of feast days. Take note, it says of feast days. We have lots of holidays that people would deem more important than Thanksgiving. They're just not considered like days that we would necessarily like make a lot of food or have a feast to celebrate. There's other activities people do to celebrate. Thanksgiving is the oldest non-Indian tradition in the United States and was first celebrated in the year 1621. It was in this year that the men and women of Plymouth, one of the first New England colonies, decided to establish a feast day to mark the end of the farming year. As devout Protestants, they called their feast day Thanksgiving, a day on which people could celebrate and give thanks to God for the crops that they had managed to grow and harvest. This was not, in fact, an original idea, but was based on the England Harvest Festival, an old custom whereby people gave thanks to God once the crops were all in. In America, however, a successful harvest was more significant than in England, for any failure to bring in an adequate supply of crops could be fatal for a new colony struggling to set itself up in an alien continent. Several early North American colonies failed because the colonists were killed off by disease or fighting, and others perished because they did not have time to prepare enough land and grow enough food for their needs during the long, cold winter months. The year 1621 was a particularly bountiful one for the Plymouth colonists, so they gave thanks for their good fortunes. In the years that followed, other colonies introduced their own Thanksgiving festivals, each one at first choosing its own date, and many varying the date according to the state of the harvest. In 1789, President George Washington gave an official Thanksgiving Day address in honor of the new Constitution, and Thanksgiving Day, like Independence Day, became one of America's great days. Nevertheless, at first the date was not fixed nationally. Indeed, it was not until 1863 that President Abraham Lincoln declared that Thanksgiving Day should be celebrated on the last Thursday of November. Other presidents made similar proclamations, and the date of Thanksgiving tended to move around until the year 1941, when Congress and the President jointly declared that it should henceforth be fixed on the fourth Thursday of November. Since then, Thanksgiving Day has remained fixed. Once a communal feast where whole communities celebrated together, Thanksgiving is today the great family festival. But apart from that, it has not changed greatly. The heart of Thanksgiving is still the fruit of the land, and the Thanksgiving feast is based essentially on the Native American foods that allowed the early settlers to survive: turkey, corn, potatoes, and squash. The wild turkeys, large birds that lived in the forest of North America, were like a miracle for the early colonists who could trap them with ease, and turkey has always been the centerpiece of the Thanksgiving feast. Potatoes were unknown to Europeans before the discovery of North America, and it was Indians who taught the early colonists how to grow and eat them. Maize, the great native North American cereal, is another ingredient of the Thanksgiving meal, eaten in the form of sweet corn. Finally, for dessert, no Thanksgiving meal is complete without pumpkin pie, the traditional tart made from pumpkins, enormous round orange types of squash. All right, we will go through each paragraph. I guess we'll just look up here first. Were there any questions in here? Superfluous. Superfluous means um um like to be extravagant, to go above and beyond, like unnecessarily extravagant. Wow, I can't talk tonight this morning. Okay. We'll do these two paragraphs here together. It says, the last weeks of the year are a festive time in most countries. But while Europeans just celebrate Christmas and the New Year, Americans begin their festive season about a month earlier. The Feast of Thanksgiving, celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November, is second only in importance to Christmas in the American calendar of feast days. Thanksgiving is the oldest non-Indian tradition in the United States, which was first celebrated in the year 1621. It was in this year that the men and women in Plymouth, one of the first New England colonies, decided to establish a feast day to mark the end of the farming year. Any questions here?
What does feast days mean?
So a feast is like a large meal to celebrate, of celebration. And so when people have just like a lot of food that everyone kind of shares, like family, friends, a big communal meal in celebration of something, that's a feast. And so having a feast day is a day set aside to celebrate something by sharing food together.
So if we have a donation, like can we call it this day a feast day?
If you have a what?
Donation? Donation for food.
Mm, like donation for food. Okay, if it's like a large amount of food, whether people have brought it or not, like even if you just cooked it yourself, you can say we're having a feast. Like you're having a bunch of food. People are sharing it.
Mm. Yeah, thank you.
But you wouldn't necessarily say it's a feast day. You could say it's a feast, like a big meal. A feast day is like a whole day set aside to celebrate something that you're doing. So maybe if you're setting aside a whole day to have some sort of celebration, then maybe you could call it a feast day. Typically people probably wouldn't say that because it's more like holidays that are like already accepted. But like I know like in the Jewish tradition, they have lots of feast days that maybe not everyone else celebrates, but that they celebrate together as a community. And so that's a day set aside to celebrate their, parts of their tradition uh, with food and that kind of stuff. Yes, good question.
And what does Plymouth mean?
Yes, Plymouth is how it's pronounced. I know it really looks like Plymouth, but it's Plymouth. That was one of the early colonies. So when the Europeans traveled to North America and first like settled there and started, new towns and little colonies to live in, like communities, um, they settled several different places in like Virginia and Pennsylvania. I want to say that's probably not right. Anyways, I know in Virginia and in one of the other states up above. Anyways, they spread out all along like the side of the Atlantic, edge of the United States. And Plymouth was one of them. Mhm. Any other
Uh,
questions?
yeah,
Yes.
first date is I did it right.
Say it again.
Yeah, first date. FEST, first date.
Oh,
First date
that,
season. Yeah.
uh-huh. Um, so festive season, like festive is like festival, right? So it's like celebratory, very like celebration, exciting, like a party, right? And so then to have that season, a season can refer to like summer, winter, fall, rainy season, hot season, right? It can refer to that, but it can also refer to like an extended amount of time. So like the Christmas season or the New Year season, if you're like celebrating New Year's for multiple weeks. Um, and so in the United States, like we have begun our festive season. Like everybody's talking about the holidays and we have school off and work off and families all traveling and getting together. Like it's become this time of year, this season where everyone's kind of celebrating and spending time together. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, hello. So Thanksgiving is originally practiced by
Mm,
like they just they just kind of want to celebrate what they have got on their harvest time, and and then later on the American people started to giving thanks to God. So can it be said that non-Indian people just want to celebrate Thanksgiving Day as just celebrating what they have got on their harvest time, and it is not about God, right?
like if the Indians would have said it was about God. I don't know if the Native Americans would have said it was about God, because I know that a lot of Native Americans have kind of their own understanding of God and their own sort of religions that they follow. So maybe they would attribute that thankfulness to a God that the Protestants or the Christians would not have worshipped, right? And so perhaps they would have been thankful to a different religion or deity that they believed in. um I'm not sure if that was involved in their side of the story, or if for them, the ones who celebrated with the European settlers, the Protestants, if it was more just a time of celebration and thankfulness, because there were like a group of Native Americans who helped the Europeans, because like during that time in American history, the European settlers like struggled a lot, and there were lots and lots of them that died, and so they would not have been successful in coming to the US and to North America if some of those Native Americans had not helped them and taught them how to plant potatoes and how to catch the turkeys and how to grow corn, and like they wouldn't have done it without the Native Americans. Now, the white settlers didn't always treat those indigenous people fairly or, correct and all those things, right? So yes, I don't think it has to necessarily be about God. For the Protestants it was, since that was their religion. Perhaps for the Native Americans it was a thankfulness to whatever, type of religion they were following. And then as America has progressed throughout the history, lots and lots of people in the US are not Christians, and so they are not giving thanks to God. They're just spending time with family. But then those people that are Christians and are following God, then they have this understanding that the good in their life comes from God, and so they want to give thankfulness to him because of that knowledge. That's a good question. Uh-huh.
Yeah, thank you for clarification. That's what I'm wondering about.
Yeah. Originally for the Protestants, it was definitely about thankfulness to God. And like George Washington, when he first made it like a national holiday, like it was definitely about God. But then as time has continued, that has kind of gone away. And then, like I said, originally for the Native Americans, I'm not sure if it was or not. You'd have to do more research about that. Yeah. Great questions. Okay, we'll keep moving along. Let's do these two paragraphs down here. As devout Protestants, they called their feast day Thanksgiving, a day on which people could celebrate and give thanks to God for the crops that they had managed to grow and harvest. This was not, in fact, an original idea, but was based on the English harvest festival, an old custom whereby people gave thanks to God once the crops were all in. In America, however, a successful harvest was more significant than in England, for any failure to bring in an adequate supply of crops could be fatal for a new colony struggling to set itself up in an alien continent. Several early North American colonies failed because the colonists were killed off by disease or fighting, and others perished because they did not have the time to prepare enough land and grow enough food for their needs during the long, cold winter months. The year 1621 was a particularly bountiful one for the Plymouth colonists, so they gave thanks for their good fortunes. Any questions here?
May I know about what does it mean by alien continent?
Yes, thank you for asking. I was gonna just tell you if no one had asked. So alien, typically you think of outer space aliens, right? It can also be used, as it is in this context, to just say that it's in a foreign country or foreign land, that it's not your homeland where you were born and your ancestors are from. So it just an alternative meaning to the word alien just means like in a foreign country or not in your homeland, which, right, taken to an extreme is like alien from outer space, right? Not in their homeland. But when it's used in this context, it's not. It doesn't have those connotations of like, what if there's aliens? It's just like you are not in the land from which you were born. Yeah. Um, it's not used a lot nowadays. Maybe in like some type of professional realm or something. I'm not sure it's used in everyday English. People are not using alien in the sense of you're like in a foreign country. It's very rare that you hear it in that context. Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
The colonists were killed off by disease or fighting.
Mhm.
So what disease like what were killed colonists?
Mm, You'd have to look, I'd have to look up, or you'd have to look up to find like what exactly the diseases were. But like if you think about it, these settlers were coming across the ocean, right, to North America to start a new life in like a land they don't really know a lot about. They're stuck on a boat for months and months, so they'd get diseases there sometimes with like those unhygienic, you know, um conditions and like just being with so many people for so long. And then once they get to the land, right? Like there's nothing there. And so they're just in the wilderness and they have to build houses and cut down trees and learn how to grow plants with plants they've never planted before, and the cold winters and just all of those things, having enough food, and then lots of people living very close together. And so I don't think it was really like anything terribly strange. I think it was all the diseases that were happening during that time. What those were, I can't tell you off the top of your head, uh off the top of my head, but like just those conditions in which they were living, not having doctors and all those things, just meant that if someone got sick, it could spread really easily, and then lots of people would die from it. And then on the flip side of the story, for the for the Native Americans, like they had were not exposed to a lot of the European diseases. And so the European settlers came over, they would get sick with their diseases back from back home, and then all of these Indians would get sick with these diseases they had never been exposed to before, and so hadn't built up any antibodies or any like protection. And so then they'd get sick really quickly and they'd often die very quickly because they had their immune systems hadn't encountered those germs before. And so that was one of the problems that kind of occurred when when the settlers moved into North America, of them mixing their germs or bringing these germs over to this country that had never experienced those before.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yes, I have read about this because like the first European like people, it they had came from another continent, right? So they have been in American soil for the first time. So the Indian, like Native American, so they have like disease, like they were killed, like because of the disease that they've been brought from another continent.
Right. Yeah. And since they hadn't ever been exposed to those germs and diseases, they couldn't, their immune systems didn't know how to defend their bodies from that. Yeah. Yeah, good questions. All right. Anything else?